Carrie, thanks Dottie, thanks Susan, who's not here, but thanking her in the ether. Thank you to the Bauer, to all my Bauer supporters out there, and thanks once again to Perry for curating this great topic. And I am happy to be here today. I'm happy to see all you out here on a gloomy day. I guess you look at art on a gloomy day, right? So welcome to the Bauer. And I'd like to preface this presentation by, the premise of it is see me, right? The exhibit is about see me. We, as human beings, we have more in common than we have differences, but for some of us, we are not seen, whether it is invisibility or hypervisibility. And what I mean by that term is an exaggerated visibility. It's when you start to name people, you prejudge them, or devaluation. So all these elements of not being seen, or seen in a different way. So this presentation looks at how people see me, how I'm being seen, but also how I see myself. And that's very important as a Black American woman in a society where a lot of times I have been devalued and invisibilized and hypervisibilized. So, invisibility. And some of you may have heard this story, but I'll tell it again. The Language of Invisibility was a series of artwork that I completed. It was the first piece of art that I made in 2017, about 4 years ago. So I'm an emerging artist as well as an exhibit designer and a visual critical studies scholar. But I got to the point in my life where I decided it was time for me to tell my own story, as opposed to telling stories of curators and other people like that. And I gave myself the permission to be an artist. And that's how I talk about my art practice. I was living in San Francisco at the time. I was attending grad school at California College of the Arts in San Francisco. And while I was in San Francisco, I happened to be in the Whole Foods checkout line, waiting for the cashier. And this white guy comes up and goes around me and goes to the cashier. And I said, excuse me, I was in line. He said, no, you weren't. No one was here. I literally just walked up and got in line. So he did not see me. And that was the first conscious point in my life that I had not been seen. And I realized what invisibility was. And so instead of internalizing it and letting it fester and become damaging to my being, which is something I used to do, I decided that, okay, it's time to make some work about this. So this happened in 2015. It took 2 years for it to really manifest, but I knew that something positive would come out of it. So I created this series called The Language of Invisibility. And I did this, and this photograph is from when I was in my artist residency in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I produced this work. And it is black felt bulletin boards with black letters on that black felt. So the two combined, like black letters on black felt, almost render invisible, right? So you can barely read these missives or these messages of invisibility. So this first one says, oh, I did not see you, and it's simply because you refuse to see me. The second one, so that's that one. The second one, do you know what you're doing? Asked when you're an expert, and I've had colleagues of mine, PhD professors, they're always being asked, do you know what you're doing? It's like, yes, I'm an expert. I've been doing this a while. It's just this constant either invisibility or devaluation, right? The next one, despite my many successes as a Black woman in America, this is how I am perceived, nearly illegible. As a Black woman working and living in a white world, I feel like a visible exception, but to them, I've become an invisible rule. And so, I don't know if you've noticed that there's some words that are in white along these 4 panels. And so, if you just read the letters in white, there's a subliminal message that is portrayed. Refuse me, help, I feel invisible. I have an architecture background. I graduated from architecture school in University of Virginia, so wahoo wah, I'm a Cavalier. And I have a 30-plus year career as a museum exhibit designer. And I say that to say that my background, my art career is on the shoulders of my background. My educational background as an architect, my professional background as an exhibit designer. And so all of my artwork is multi-layered. There are multiple messages that happen, but there are multiple ways of looking at it and seeing it, and multiple kind of like pieces or parts to that puzzle. So just letting you know that there's always something more than skin deep in my artwork. And you can see that with this piece, right? You see that there's those letters in white that translate that next message. So hypervisibility, meaning you hypervisualize, you exaggerate my visibility, you name me out of my being. So I created this project that I'm working on called Not Whoopi. I have been called Whoopi Goldberg so many times. You look like Whoopi Goldberg. I know, right? And various times in my life, right? Like when I was 30, when I was 40, when I was 50, you know, and I have aged, Whoopi has aged, and it's like we look nothing alike, right? So anyway, and the most recent example happened with my mother about 2 years ago. We were in the Target parking lot, and this guy came up and said, "Oh, you look like Whoopi Goldberg." I was like, "See?" To my mother, like, "See?" So I came up with this project called Not Whoopi, and basically it's the premise, like, if I have dreadlocks and brown skin, it must be Whoopi Goldberg, right? So this Not Whoopi piece is, you know, I came up with this symbol, so that's symbol for not, and then Whoopi. And I've asked friends of mine, artist friends, or just other friends who have dreadlocks, who have also been called Whoopi Goldberg. So I call them the Whoopi deniers. We're all Whoopi deniers, right? So I have asked them I send them this card and ask them to take a have someone photograph them with this sign, Not Whoopi, right? And it also speaks to the term whoopee, like making whoopee. And so it's speaking like not whoopee, you know, because Black women have been over-sexualized historically, right? So it's like, yeah, no, we're not your sexual being, right? So there's that double layer, right? Multiple layer that happens with that. Devaluation. Devaluation is what it is. It's like you're not valuing who I am as a Black woman. And it's not in everything that I'm talking about. Anyone who has felt othered in their life can relate to what I'm talking about. So devaluation I manifested as an homage to my grandmother, whose 67-year marriage to my grandfather, birthing him 9 children, working inside the home for 67 years, went so devalued. In fact, my uncle uttered these 3 words, "That's Pops' money," referring to my grandfather's pension that my grandmother was receiving after my grandfather died. And my mother had said, no, something about Mama's money, and my uncle was like, "No, that's not Mama's money, that's Pops' money." Oh, really? So all that work she did inside the home, all those years, she didn't earn that money? So I have realized the best way to convince people of things, you got to show them literally what's going on. So I created this project called That's Pops' Money, where I created 804 time cards to chronicle the 67 years that my grandmother toiled inside the home. So there are 804 time cards that represent 1 month of each of those 67 years. I printed them with blue ink on black paper because that labor was invisible, right? So it's this whole element of rendering that invisibility, but you can see the sheer volume of the work. This installation was at Riverviews in Lynchburg. And here's a close-up. So you can see that those time cards that I made, I debossed them by using a letterpress printer, right? So I hand cranked all 804 time cards through a press because I wanted to give some semblance or homage to my grandmother's labor by me physically doing this work. The blue ink on black paper rendered the text red, which was kind of interesting. And I used blue ink because I wanted to kind of relate to my grandmother's blue collar type of labor. There are 9 time cards that chronicle the decades that they were married, and you see that one, 1980 in white. So the total was 813 time cards. The other piece about this is that my grandmother had 5 boys and 4 girls. My mother's in the audience. She's one of those girls and the oldest child. So she basically became like a second mother. That's probably why I'm the only child. So those 5 boys and 4 girls, my grandfather, no doubt, valued the boys more than the girls, and that was evident. So on the birth date of the boys, I foil stamped their names in white, and for the girls, I foil stamped their names in black, because their value was invisible, like my grandmother's labor. So the great thing about modular kind of artwork in a way, it can translate and be portable and go to other places. So this was That's Pops' Money installed in Charlottesville at Chroma Gallery. And Chroma Gallery is in a bank vault. So I love the irony, right, of putting something that's considered invaluable or devalued in a place that holds value. So this installation was in the bank vault. It couldn't take all of the 12 panels, so I think it was just 10 panels that I was able to install along the walls of the vault. And then the remaining cards I put into 3 kind of stacks with 3 significant dates. So the one on the left is the date that one of my grandparents' children died. So, it's always hard for a parent to live longer than their child. So that's the date of my uncle's death. 2006 is the year that my grandfather died. And then that one on the right is the death date of my grandfather's name on the day that he died. So those 3 stacks, you can see just like the volume also of the time cards. And then I had a show in Danville in 2021, so almost last year in April of 2021, and this is the installation there. So you can see how it just translates into different entities. So I also want to talk about other Black women artists and what they're doing related to invisibility, hypervisibility, and devaluation, and just like that there is this element of Black women artists taking up space in this country. And I want this talk to also be kind of educational in the sense that not just about my work, but other artists that are out there doing this type of work. So Alisha B. Wormsley is an artist out of Pittsburgh, and she did this piece called There Are Black People in the Future. And it's based on, she said originally it was like this kind of like nerd sci-fi piece because all the sci-fi that she ever looked at or read, it's like there are no Black people, right? So this whole piece of like, there are Black people in the future. We're claiming this space, that we exist. We're seen. We are here. And this billboard, this one is in Detroit, but the one she had in Pittsburgh was in a gentrifying area. That's the other piece. It was a historically Black neighborhood that was being gentrified. So these Black citizens were being displaced from their homes. So this is one of the reasons why she put this billboard up. And the developers took it down, which started a movement of this billboard. So it's gone all over the world. There's one in London, has been one in London. This next one is in Detroit. And you can see what's great about this, it's like the sponsors, like the Goethe Institute, which is a German institute, is like one of the funders for this piece. So I love when developers think that they're crushing something, and they're really kind of like fomenting and helping to start that movement. Deborah Roberts is another artist who is based in Texas, and she and I, she's about the same age, I'm late 50s, she's 60, and so there's a level of visibility and visualization that we see of women of this generation. So her work is mixed media, collage work, and she focuses on little girls, little Black girls. And the reason she started is because she was like, when I was watching television, there were no Black characters. So me as a little Black girl, how was I thinking I could, who could I be? I didn't see myself. I wasn't seen in the landscape. So how do I visualize myself? Who am I? Right? And so Deborah started collaging these pieces, and you can see like the mouth of white mouth, right? The hands are white. So I would love to have a conversation with Deborah about, the meaning, more of the meaning behind these kind of details of these pieces. But there's an innocence with the child, right? But then the look on the face, maybe a little troubling, curious, who am I, right? And then this one, normal to dark. I love this one also because of the title, normal to dark, kind of interesting. You can take that in many ways. Like the little girl on the back is light skinned. Is that normal and dark, right? In the Black community, color, shades of color is a very important element, right? So internal racism, internal hate, things we have to look at. And with this one, like the hand holding the sweet treat is a white hand. But then we go into triumph, right? It's not all doom and gloom. And part of this piece is that as an artist, as I said in the beginning, I was able to triumph beyond that slight against my being by making artwork. I also collect artwork, and I used to always say to my artist friends, like, I am so jealous. You get to work out all of your stuff, right, with your artwork. So finally I'm there, I'm doing it myself. Amy Sherald. For those who know, Amy Sherald is the woman who painted First Lady Michelle Obama's portrait that is now traveling throughout the country. So Amy Sherald, and I knew her before she blew up, and she's really big time artist now, getting $1 million commissions. One of her pieces just auctioned for $4.5 million. So it's like, okay, that's the art world for you. So Amy Sherald was commissioned to do a painting of Breonna Taylor. And in case you don't know, Breonna Taylor was the young woman who was murdered in her own home by two or three cops in Louisville, Kentucky, when they busted into her home on an illegal warrant, or a warrant that was wrong, and shot her and her boyfriend, and they killed her. So a woman is still not safe in her home. So Breonna Taylor, started a movement as a result of this, in a way. Amy Sherald was commissioned by Vanity Fair to paint this portrait for the cover of a Vanity Fair magazine that was talking about this subject matter. And then Amy said, no, I want to do something more than that. I'll do this cover, but I want to go beyond that, right? I want to start this movement. I want this portrait to live, not in some private collector's hands, but in public institutions. So the Ford Foundation, which is a huge foundation that supports the arts, they paid, and this is $1 million commission, they paid for this painting to be done, and it's split by the Speed Museum of Art in Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor was from, and also the National Museum of African American History and Culture. So this painting will live in the public realm. And here's the painting, close up. And I love what the Speed did. This exhibit was amazing. It was called Promise, Witness, Remembrance, right? And it was African American artists looking at those three emotions, those levels: promise, witness, remembrance. And this painting was at the end of the exhibit journey, and they treated it very much like an ecclesiastic painting, right? Glowing light around it. So, and this is the painting that Sherald did, which is quite beautiful. She worked with Breonna Taylor's mother. She had conversations with her about it. She was able to look at videos of Breonna to get the sense of who she was. She wanted to hear her voice. And she and her mother selected this teal blue, which is quite beautiful. And Amy Sherald is also known for graying out the pigment of African American people. And she selected the jewelry as well, this very simple, beautiful cross, gold cross hanging around her neck. And the engagement ring that her boyfriend had bought her, but he didn't get the chance to propose. So, taking that tragedy into triumph, right? So it's this beautiful portrait Breonna lives on in some ways, visually. And talking about triumph, Simone Leigh. Simone Leigh is an artist based in Brooklyn. She is representing America, the U.S. Pavilion, at this year's Venice Biennale, which is a major art fair that happens in Venice every other year. And I think it's 100 years old. prominent artists get selected to represent America in the American Pavilion. Simone Leigh did this piece called Brick House, and it's a play off of that song by the Commodores from '77, but also the architecture of West African houses. So Brick House was at the High Line, which is this major interior urban walkway in New York City, and you could see it from the road below, and it's on this the High Line overpass, and it's a walking pedestrian walkway. It's not, you can't drive on it. And this was the first High Line plinth commission that Simone Leigh got. She was the artist for it. And then there's the piece there at sunset, at sunset, coming towards sunset. And all of these photographs in this presentation are photographs that I've taken. Like I travel to go see this art, to see this artwork. And so Simone Leigh, and this piece is quite brilliant. It's 16 feet tall and it's bronze piece. So she's got those kind of like elements of the braiding, the afro, at the bottom of the braids are cowrie shells. So she's making reference back to the African continent, to her African heritage. Simone Leigh is a brilliant scholar as well. She does research about her work, so all of her pieces are wrought with symbolism. And then coming towards the end, there's Ebony G Patterson, another younger artist whose career has just skyrocketed recently. She does work in various materials, flowers, collages, but I thought this was quite appropriate for this exhibit, See Me, which is a fabric, woven fabric piece, hand-stitched, dyed fabric that she's done. But this is one, I think, of 15 pieces. And then there's See Me again, right? But it's hidden. So it's this whole element of this layering, of this invisibility, this back and forth, I'm kind of seen, I'm not seen, right? So it's these elements of like, how am I rendered as a Black person? And this piece is called For Those Who Came to Bear Witness, which is quite interesting because bearing witness is a very important element, and especially for Ebony. She says, accounting requires witnessing. And what does it mean to witness? It means looking, it means thinking, but most importantly, it means listening and giving weight and value to the voices that have been dismissed, right? So this was quite appropriate for this exhibit, See Me. Who are we dismissing? And these are the, 16 panels that Ebony has done. And all of the panels say See Me in their various iterations. So a text-based artist is a great way for me to end my presentation because I'm a text-based artist myself, and talking about the constellation of Blackness, which is that piece that is on the wall there. So this was a work that I did in an artist residency last year, and actually I landed in Sacramento 2 days ago, January 6th of last year, and started my residency for 3 months. And while I was there, I did 50 of these pieces as silkscreen elements with black glitter, fine black glitter on some of them, right? So it's this whole element of my languages of invisibility or devaluation or triumph in this form of the silkscreen. So this piece is the actual screen, the frame that I used to make that first piece. And it goes back to the whole Whoopi Goldberg piece, right? So no, I don't look like Whoopi Goldberg. So I'm emphatically stating that, right? So that's that triumph in a way. And so these are the pieces. So once again, I showed them in white so you can see what the message is. And then if you read just the bottom layer and just read the white text, F no to my silencing. I'm not going to be silenced as a woman, as a Black woman. Reading just the bottom layer. My unapologetic and assured Black visibility will surprise and shock you. Now part of this piece, all of these elements are either things that have been said to me, like a friend of mine said, I was surprised and shocked by how smart you are.
Wow.
What do you do with that, right? You make art.
Wow.
That's what you do with that. So.
That was a friend?
Yeah, a new friend, but I'm a very forgiving person, so I had to let her know. So anyway. And so there are these two pieces together in glitter. And I did a set in glitter because black glitter is reflective, right? So it's reflecting shimmering, this internal kind of flame in a way. And so this is the show that's up right now in Sacramento. The piece is in the group show with the other artists in residence. And you can see the various sizes. I did 2 sizes, and also how they look over a large wall. And this is another view of it with more of them. So I wanted to end by saying that my artwork is not pretty. It is a reflection and a visual articulation of my experience as a Black woman in America. My artwork is not polite. In fact, it's sometimes harsh, just like my daily existence in the way that I'm perceived. Sometimes invisible, sometimes hypervisible, like when you call me homeless or a drug dealer, or when you say that I look like Whoopi Goldberg, and all 3 of those things have happened to me. Sometimes when you devalue my worth and experience and fail to believe me as a Black woman. But my artwork is always multi-layered and is designed to provoke, make you think, and if you are aware enough, question your privilege, and depending on your level of self-actualization, question your privilege in your position of power. So thank you for listening. I am here for questions. I hope you get the sense that I am very personable, those who know me. Anytime I can embrace a friend that says that she's surprised and shocked by how smart I am, I'm good to go. Anyway, thanks for listening, and hope to see you.
I have a question.
Sure.
The sparkly ink, I'm gonna ask about how you did it.
Yeah.
And so is that like, did you put glitter in it, or is it, so how did you do that?
I had to silk screen it several times, so it's layered up, and then quickly hand glitter it.
Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah. So I had to like tape out the ones that weren't, 'cause, you know, some of them have like this bottom one has glitter on it. It's both paint and glitter, right? So these that had the white, I had to tape those out to mask those out
Oh, yeah, I was wondering about that.
to make sure that the glitter didn't get on those. But it's all about timing and making sure that as soon as I ran the screen through and the paint was still wet, run over and glitter everything. So it was like, I was saying to someone the other day, it's like, this is why I have to do yoga, because my hard work is arduous, right? I am like working. Either it's a Vandercook press where I'm cranking through, I'm like bent over a table pulling a screen, right? So it's like, I gotta stay in shape. That's what Louise Bourgeois said as well. She was like, my artwork is hard, you know, I gotta like,
Gotta stay in shape. Yeah, I didn't realize that you actually can
Yes, he's all-
explain that.
yes.
That is not easy.
no.
There's these. Interesting.
Yep. And I cut the paper too.
Oh, you cut them out?
No, I cut the paper. The paper came in big sheets, so I had to cut it down.
Oh, yeah.
So like with the time cards, I cut all of those time cards. Those time cards did not come in that size.
I have seen that piece and it is incredibly powerful.
Thank you.
But I didn't, you know, some of us have a tendency to want to know how it's attached.
For that piece, time card
For
piece,
that piece or these.
these are just little black thumbtacks
Okay.
in the corners from the dollar store.
Okay.
Because there's something interesting about like using these basic materials, right? And because some of the stuff that artists have to buy, the equipment's just like too expensive. But why not go to these basic materials? Because those little beautiful little black,
Do the job.
They do the job. And for the time card, thumbtacks once again.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I don't know if you remember it, that there were black thumbtacks, and for all of the ones that had like the debossed the names in it, those were silver thumbtacks.
To be honest, once I delved into what was there, I stopped paying attention to how you presented it, and I've been curious ever since.
Okay. Well, there's a whole system to it actually, because none of the names are the actual names of my aunts and uncles, because it's just identity theft.
Right.
So like how I came up with the names, they're birth dates aren't really their birth dates, the day that they were born. There's a whole system to how I did it, because I'm so weary of like identity theft, and Jefferson is not my grandparents' name either, so that's the name of my alias too. But it worked out because Thomas was my grandfather's name, and so, you know, Thomas Jefferson made sense. As much of a jerk my grandmother was. That's another story, that's another lecture.
That's a power.
Thank you. Yeah. It was cathartic for me to do it. My aunt, who lives in DC, when she came to see, she was like, "Thank you for honoring my mother." So that was good to hear.
Yeah, else have questions?
So what are some of your next projects going to be? I'm sure you've got some ideas.
Well, I just finished the design for a project in Augsburg, Germany, where they asked me to create a piece of art as an intervention. It's a house museum called Fuga and Velsa, and they were merchants in Augsburg in the 1500s who made their money through tapestries and also through precious metals, but they also had a hand in the slave trade. And once the house museum found this out, they wanted to do something about it. So I just completed a piece, so I did the design of it, where I made a tapestry, or a design for a tapestry for them, that will be in the museum. So it's reflective of that story, and it's about 3 feet wide by 19 feet long tapestry. Because Augsburg is known for their textiles, so they're gonna make it there. And I'm gonna send them the graphic files. So that's a project, and I just finished a project that was in Charlottesville, where I spelled out BLM in solar-powered lights, Black Lives Matter, and that was at a festival, that was a one-night festival in Charlottesville. And I'm doing something for Red Hill Plantation, which is Patrick Henry's plantation. They just discovered a burial ground in the last 2 years, African burial ground, and they want to pay homage to that, so they've asked me to come up to make a piece of artwork that will be a memorial. So I'm doing that. So, that kind of stuff. Trying to stay busy. Trying to stay, you know, paid. I gotta eat. My mother needs new shoes. I've left you speechless.
It's so quiet.
There's a lot to think about.
You left us thinking.
Contemplative.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. And that means job well done. That's what I want. I want you to think about the work. The woman who's the director at Verge, which is in Sacramento, where I did the residency, she said, "Veronica, all your work should come with a warning label. You will have to think when you watch this work." Right? Just know.
Just like that's a bad thing?
For some people.